Dobro. History. Archive.
Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Hello.
Today we are opening one of the most complex, truly tragic, and politically charged files in aviation history. We're doing a deep dive into Pan American World Airways Flight 103.
The Lockerbie disaster.
Exactly. The disaster that really ripped apart the skies over Scotland and, fundamentally reshaped global security forever.
It really did.
For anyone trying to understand that intersection of sophisticated forensic science, decades of intense geopolitics, and that ultimate pursuit of state-sponsored terrorism, well, this is where you start.
It's an absolutely essential case study. The event itself, happening on December 21st, 1988, it sits right at this confluence of the waning Cold War and, the rise of modern international terrorism.
Right.
It was so much more than just a single catastrophic failure. It was a perfect storm.
Catastrophic convergence, I think, is how the sources put it.
That's the perfect phrase for it.
Definitely.
A convergence of security vulnerabilities, these deep-seated geopolitical tensions, and, of course, the shadow of state aggression.
And that immediate context is so crucial. This didn't happen in a vacuum, did it?
Not at all. It occurred just 5 months after the U.S. Navy ship, the USS Vincennes, shot down Iran Air Flight 655 over the Persian Gulf.
Killing 290 civilians.
Exactly. And that incident, it provided a profound, very clear motive for retaliation. It was this grim shadow that just hung over the entire investigation from day one.
Yeah.
And when we talk about scale, the numbers are just immediate and stark. I mean, we are looking at 270 total fatalities.
259 people on the plane and 11 innocent residents on the ground in Lockerbie.
And the physical fallout was equally immense. The disintegration was so violent, it scattered, everything. Components, bodies, personal effects, across this vast debris field spanning 845 square miles of Scottish countryside.
That scope alone, 845 square miles.
Yeah.
It forced the initiation of what the sources rightly call an investigation of unprecedented scale and complexity.
And that complexity, that is our mission today. We really need to walk you through the precise physics of the explosion, detailing why the plane broke up the way it did.
We'll also examine the initial heavily favored suspects.
The Palestinian PFLP-GC.
Right. And then we'll meticulously track that forensic, political pivot that shifted the investigation's focus entirely toward Tripoli and Libyan intelligence.
And we have to conclude with the final and perhaps most definitive chapter.
Which is happening right now.
Exactly. The arrest and the highly anticipated upcoming trial of Abu Aijila Mohammed Massoud, the alleged bomb maker, which is bringing this whole decades-long quest for truth right into the U.S. court system.
Okay, let's unpack this journey. Let's start with the flight itself and the vulnerability that allowed Abram to even be placed on board.
Right.
The aircraft was a veteran, a Boeing 747-121 registered N739PA, christened Clipper Mate of the Seas.
Yeah, and it was one of the originals, actually. We're talking about the 15th 747 ever built, delivered to Pan Am way back in 1970. It had accumulated tens of thousands of flight hours.
So on that day, it had already completed its journey from San Francisco to London Heathrow as Flight 124.
Yep. And it was being readied for the return leg to New York and Detroit as Flight 103, departing from Gate K14.
And this turnaround at Heathrow, this is precisely where the system failed.
Mm-hmm.
The flight departed 25 minutes late at 18.25 GMT, just due to some gate congestion. A small detail, right?
It seems like a small detail.
But that delay determined the geography of the whole thing, ensuring the plane was directly over Lockerbie when that timer ran out.
But the real operational failure, the thing that investigators keyed in on, it centers on the interline transfer process at Heathrow.
Okay, what is that exactly?
So this system involved moving both passengers and baggage arriving from feeder flights onto the larger transatlantic jet. Critically, Flight 103 accepted bags that originated from a Boeing 727 that had just come in from Frankfurt.
Help us visualize this critical security gap. What exactly was the process and why was it so vulnerable back in 1988?
Well, think of it this way. In the 80s, security protocols mandated pretty strict screening for baggage that was checked by passengers at the point of origin. So a suitcase checked in London, for instance.
Okay.
However, luggage that arrived at Heathrow already on another flight, that interline transfer, was often treated with, less rigor, especially if the passenger hadn't made the connection for whatever reason.
So the core failure was the lack of passenger bag reconciliation?
That's the one.
Meaning they just didn't have a reliable system to confirm that every single piece of checked baggage had an accompanying passenger physically on board the next flight.
Exactly right. An unaccompanied bag, potentially holding the IED, could be checked onto that short Frankfurt to London feeder flight.
And even if the bomber never boarded the second leg.
The bag would continue on to Flight 103. This gap became the central focus of the entire criminal inquiry. It was the soft underbelly of aviation security at the time.
And the cost of that vulnerability was, of course, human. The manifest shows a seasoned crew led by Captain James McQuarrie, a highly experienced pilot.
In total, you had 243 passengers, 16 crew members representing 21 different nationalities.
And although the loss was global, the attack was a massive blow against American interests.
Oh, absolutely. Of those on board, 190 were U.S. citizens. But when you look at the crew roster, it really humanizes the international reach of Pan Am.
Yeah, you see these incredible individuals like Siv Ulla Engström. She was a 51-year-old Swedish national.
And she wasn't just a flight attendant. She was a polyglot, fluent in 5 languages, a scholar of Chinese philosophy. She was known among the younger staff as a supportive mother hen.
Then you had Noelle Bertie Campbell, French-born, a former Miss France who had become an American citizen, known for her grace, her quiet efficiency.
And Maria Lara 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏, a vivacious Spaniard who commuted for her job from Madrid. And Jocelyn Reyna, just 26 years old, an aspiring actress from L.A. who had transferred to the London base specifically to broaden her horizons to see the world.
Each one was a distinct, irreplaceable life cut short. But the most tragic, concentrated loss, it centered on the 35 students from Syracuse University.
Yeah.
They were just returning home from their semester abroad, part of the Division of International Programs Abroad, DIP, based in London and Florence.
The loss just devastated the university. Chancellor Melvin Eggers, he struggled to find the words. He ultimately defined them as risk-takers, dreamers, planners, leaders.
And you think of the futures interrupted. Journalism majors, engineers, artists, these were young people in that, exhilarating phase of life where the world feels completely open to them.
And the legacy they left is so palpable. Syracuse University established the Remembrance Scholarships to honor their memory.
Awarded annually to students who exhibit the resilience and potential of those who were lost.
And beyond the scholarships, the university maintains the Pan Am Flight 103 Lockerbie Air Disaster Archives. They house the students' personal effects, their journals, letters, correspondence.
They're not just artifacts.
No, not at all. They are permanent, tangible testaments to these interrupted lives, ensuring their stories remain active parts of that university community. It's an incredibly moving and vital legacy.
Now, we have to move into the mechanics of the destruction because understanding the science is just critical to understanding the investigation that followed. The detonation occurred precisely at 19.02.50 GMT, while the 747 was cruising at 31,000 feet.
And the forensic details, they tell a very precise story of targeting. The bomb was located inside luggage container AVN 4041.
Which was in the forward cargo hold.
Exactly. The IED itself contained approximately 450 grams, so just under a pound of Semtex-H plastic explosive.
And the packaging was key. It was concealed within a specific model, a Toshiba Bomb Beat RTS-F16 radio cassette player.
Which was inside a brown Samsonite suitcase surrounded by just ordinary clothing.
The bomb was small, but its placement and composition were engineered for maximum effect, weren't they?
They were. And this is where we need to dive deep into the physics. The Semtex blast didn't just punch a hole. It created something forensically remarkable and, frankly, horrifically destructive called a Mach stem shockwave.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because this detail explains why the plane disintegrated so instantaneously rather than just suffering some localized damage. Tell us about the Mach stem.
Well, typically when an explosion happens in open air, the blast wave, the incident wave, it travels outward and loses energy very quickly.
Okay.
However, in the confined space of that cargo container and the fuselage, the dynamic changes dramatically.
So the shock wave hits the metal skin of the plane.
Precisely. The incident wave travels outward, hits that rigid, curved metal surface of the fuselage, and immediately reflects backward.
Right.
This reflected wave then meets and combines with the incident wave that's still traveling forward. When these two high-pressure waves merge, they create a zone of extreme, super-pressurized force right at the point of impact. That is the Mach stem.
So instead of two separate weakening waves, you get one massive amplified pressure point concentrated in a very small area of the metal.
Exactly. The energy is it's multiplied exponentially. The resulting force was not just enough to create that basketball-sized hole that you always hear about.
Right, that's the common phrase.
It is. But the energy propagated instantly through the aircraft's skin. The stress exceeded the structural integrity, and it caused fractures to run like lightning along the rivet lines, literally unzipping the fuselage.
And the breakup sequence was astonishingly rapid. We're talking less than 3 seconds from detonation to catastrophic failure.
Yeah.
What happened in that terrifyingly small window?
First, the nose section, which contained the flight deck, the cockpit, the first class section, it separated completely.
While traveling at, what, 500 miles an hour?
About 430 knots, so yeah, around 500 mph. It peeled backward like a lid being torn off a tin can. It actually struck the number 3 engine on the starboard wing as it detached, which contributed to the rapid loss of the wing structure.
The pilots had no chance to even react.
None. The cockpit voice recorder stopped at the instant of the explosion. It captured only this faint crunching sound as the structure failed. There was no distress call, no warning, nothing.
And the main fuselage,
Yeah,
still containing most of the passengers and all that fuel.
it was then dynamically unstable. It pitched violently downward, starting this steep, disintegrating dive. Crucially, the mock stem analysis allowed forensic scientists not only to confirm the size of the blast, but also to pinpoint the exact location within that container, which was a critical step in the whole reconstruction.
So the debris rained down across a staggering 845 square miles, kicking off the largest crime scene in UK history. Let's focus on the terrifying ground impact in Lockerbie itself.
The wreckage separated into 2 main trails. You had the northern trail, which carried all the lighter components, clothing, paper, insulation, small bits of baggage.
All dispersed by the winds.
Right, carried by the prevailing winds, some of it found hundreds of miles away near the North Sea.
But the southern trail, that was where the ballistic impact occurred, where all the heavy, denser components fell.
And the most devastating impact was Sherwood Crescent.
That is the site of absolute catastrophe.
It is. The central section of the 747, which included the 2 wings carrying over 200,000 pounds of jet fuel, plunged right into that residential area at over 500 miles per hour.
The descriptions from residents who survived are just chilling. A local man, Ian Wood, described the resulting fireball as something like a nuclear explosion.
He recalled a fierce, instantaneous heat and a massive mushroom cloud that just transformed the night sky.
And another resident, Jasmine Bell, recounted the sound. Not just an explosion, but a screeching roar as the metal descended, followed by fire that seemed to be raining down from above.
This wasn't just a plane crash, it was a localized apocalypse.
The force was tremendous. We're talking about a geological impact. The crash created a crater 47 meters long. That's 155 feet.
And the seismic shock was registered at 1.6 on the Richter scale, 14 miles away.
Wow.
The house at 13 Sherwood Crescent, occupied by Maurice and Dora Henry, was at the exact epicenter of that wing strike. It was completely vaporized.
No trace of the occupants was ever found.
None. In total, 11 Lockerbie residents were killed, and 21 homes were destroyed or damaged beyond repair.
Yet we have this strange juxtaposition of Tundergarth. The nose section, the cockpit, fell relatively intact 3 miles east of the town, near Tundergarth Church.
This contrast is important. The nose section, being lighter and detaching early, it hit the ground in a field. This allowed the flight crew and several passengers to be recovered there.
And that area near the church has since become a focus for memorials.
A very quiet one, yes. It offers this sort of contemplative contrast to the absolute devastation of Sherwood Crescent.
And amidst the horror, the compassion shown by the residents became a defining legacy of Lockerbie, didn't it?
The local response was extraordinary. People immediately began the agonizing process of identification and, comforting the deceased. The story of Bunty Galloway, who heard the explosion and later found the body of a child in her yard, is often recalled.
Instead of fleeing, they became impromptu first responders and custodians.
They did, and the commitment to dignity was just profound.
You're talking about the Lockerbie Laundry.
Absolutely. One of the most remarkable efforts. Local women organized shifts to meticulously wash, iron, and catalog the clothing and personal effects recovered from the wreckage.
Why?
To ensure that when these items were finally returned to the victims' families, they were treated with respect. It was about restoring a dignity that the act of terrorism had sought to strip away.
And then there are the farmers, who discovered bodies across the remote fields for days.
Farmers, like the Connell family, stood guard over the bodies in their fields, sometimes for hours in freezing temperatures, until authorities could arrive. They did this specifically to ensure that the victims were not left alone.
That's incredible.
It's a small act of profound respect that provided immense, if heartbreaking, comfort to families learning that their loved ones had been watched over in their final resting place. It speaks volumes about the community spirit there.
Before we move on to the investigation, we do have to address the persistent help me note myth. It's an emotional detail, but the forensic evidence completely contradicts it.
It is a powerful urban legend, and you can see why. It suggests survival, a final human moment.
But it's not possible.
No. Forensic pathology is crystal clear on this. The instantaneous violence of the Mach stun blast, combined with the rapid decompression at 31,000 feet, exposure to minus 50 degrees Celsius, and the violent breakup at 500 miles per hour.
It would have caused immediate unconsciousness.
Immediate and irreversible unconsciousness due to hypoxia and thermal shock. There was no possibility of writing a note or even being conscious during the descent.
So the myth is really a reflection of a deep psychological need.
Exactly. The need to find a final, conscious human voice in a tragedy defined by cold, mechanical violence. We have to be clear. Death was immediate.
Okay, let's shift gears now to the staggering forensic investigation. How do you even begin to process a crime scene that spans 845 square miles?
The mobilization was historic. We're talking about this methodical, almost archaeological approach. Over 5,000 responders were involved. Police, forensic experts, 600 soldiers.
And they conducted a literal fingertip search.
A fingertip search across fields and forests, meticulously tagging and bagging every single component, no matter how small.
And all of this material was transported to the Army Depot at Longtown.
Correct. Longtown became the heart of the reconstruction. Experts built this massive open-air skeleton of the 747 fuselage using wire mesh and wood.
So they could place every piece back.
Systematically. They placed every recovered piece of debris back into its approximate location. And this meticulous process confirmed that the explosion originated specifically within container AVN 4041.
The true breakthrough, though, came from the Royal Armament Research and Development Establishment, RAD.
Yes, that's where they found the first forensic link. Dr. Thomas Hayes and Alan Faraday at RAD confirmed the use of Semtex H plastic explosive based on chemical residue and distinct pitting patterns on the metal.
But the critical identifier was found in minute fragments of black plastic and a printed circuit board, no bigger than coins.
Exactly. Which were matched to the Toshiba Bombate RT-SF16 radio cassette player. And this detail, while it sounds technical, was incredibly important in redirecting the whole investigation.
Because it helped them rule out a major suspect.
It was the first time they could do that. Initially, fingers pointed heavily toward the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine General Command, the PFLPGC.
Led by Ahmed Jibril.
Right. They had a clear motive and the capability. The PFLPGC were known to use barometric bombs concealed in Toshiba radios, but, and this is the key, they always used the RTF-423 model.
So the discovery of the RT-SF16 model at Lockerbie provided compelling material evidence that the bomb was not consistent with the PFLPGC's known devices.
Precisely. It forced investigators to look beyond that initial Palestinian-Iranian framework and start searching for organizations and states using different specialized devices. And that eventually led them to Libya.
And that search led them to the smoking gun, right? That tiny piece of circuit board known as the MST13 timer fragment.
This is the core evidence connecting the crime to Tripoli.
What was it exactly?
This fragment, designated PT35B, was found embedded in a piece of charred gray cloth, which was identified as a collar piece from a Slalom brand shirt. It was smaller than a fingernail, yet it held the key.
How was a connection to Libya established?
In June of 1990, an FBI explosives expert, Thomas Thurman, was able to match the circuit layout of PT35B to an MST13 timer that had been previously seized from Libyan intelligence operatives in Senegal back in 1988.
And where did these timers come from?
They were manufactured by a small Swiss firm called Meebo, and their records confirmed they had delivered 20 such timers specifically to the Libyan military in 1985. This created that crucial, undeniable physical link.
But this fragment, while it was central to the case, it became the source of immense legal controversy.
It did.
The defense alleged it might have been fabricated or planted. Why?
There are several reasons, and this became the central legal flashpoint at the trial. Firstly, the head of Meebo, Edwin Bollier, gave incredibly conflicting accounts over the years. At times, he confirmed the fragment was definitively from his batch of timers sold to Libya. At other times, he claimed it was a prototype model that had never been sold, or even that he had given it to investigators years after the bombing.
That immediately casts a cloud of doubt on the source.
It does. And furthermore, the defense raised some highly technical forensic questions, specifically about the construction of the fragment itself.
Okay.
Standard production timers use something called double-sided solder masking. However, the defense claimed PT-35B showed signs of being single-sided, suggesting it was either a pre-production prototype or, more sinisterly, a piece of evidence fabricated after the fact to fit the desired political narrative linking Libya.
So a tiny piece of plastic, smaller than a fingernail, with microscopic differences in soldering, became the foundation upon which an entire case of state-sponsored terrorism was built.
That's the power and, well, the peril of forensic evidence. The prosecution had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this single fragment, manufactured by Mebo and linked to Libya, was definitively the timer that destroyed the aircraft.
Okay, so once they had the timer and the clothing fragment, the prosecution's job became tracing that slalom shirt back to its purchaser.
Right.
And this required tracing the bomb's potential journey, beginning in Malta.
The slalom shirt, which contained the timer fragment, was traced back through shipping manifests to a specific store, Mary's house in Sliema, Malta.
And the entire narrative of the plot, the introduction of the bomb, then crystallized around this one location.
And this leads us to Tony 𝐃𝐄𝐄, the key, if somewhat inconsistent, witness.
𝐃𝐄𝐄 was the Maltese shopkeeper who owned Mary's house. He testified that in early December 1988, he sold the slalom shirt, along with pajamas and an umbrella, to a tall Libyan man, who he later identified as Abdelbaset al-Megrahi.
And what made 𝐃𝐄𝐄's testimony so powerful, despite its inconsistencies regarding the dates?
The detail about the umbrella was critical, and it's a great example of circumstantial corroboration. 𝐃𝐄𝐄 recalled the Libyan man buying the umbrella because it was raining heavily that day. So investigators checked meteorological records for Malta in December 1988 and confirmed that one of the only days of heavy rain when Megrahi was confirmed to be on the island was December 7, 1988.
So that provided a small, seemingly ironclad temporal link.
It did. And the prosecution's theoretical path established the bomb's journey.
Introduced at Lucca Airport in Malta as unaccompanied baggage, routed through Frankfurt on Air Malta flight KM-180, transferred at Heathrow, and then placed onto Pan Am 103.
This narrative led to the indictments in November 1991 of the two Libyan intelligence officers, Abdelbaset Ali Mohamed al-Megrahi,
The senior intelligence officer.
and Lamin Khalifa Fima, the LAA station manager at Lucca.
But Colonel Muammar Gaddafi refused to surrender them, which triggered a decade of intense international pressure.
The UN Security Council stepped in with sweeping sanctions, imposing an international air travel ban on Libya and an arms sales embargo.
And this diplomatic and economic pressure just mounted relentlessly, aiming to isolate the regime until the suspects were handed over.
The diplomatic deadlock seemed unbreakable. How did Nelson Mandela manage to break it after nearly 10 years?
Mandela's involvement was absolutely essential. Gaddafi had supported the African National Congress during the apartheid era, so Mandela had this unique leverage and trust.
Right.
Mandela, working closely with Saudi Arabian Prince Bandar, brokered an unprecedented compromise. He convinced Gaddafi that surrender was the only way to lift the crippling sanctions, but that the trial had to avoid U.S. or U.K. soil to maintain Libyan dignity.
The result was the surreal creation of Camp Zeist in the Netherlands.
Yes. A former U.S. military base in the middle of Europe was legally designated as a piece of Scottish territory for the duration of the proceedings.
The suspects were surrendered in '99. Trial started in 2000.
And it was conducted under Scottish law, but in a neutral country.
The trial featured a panel of 3 Scottish judges, and notably, no jury, a modification required due to the sheer complexity and political sensitivity of the case. What did the prosecution rely on besides the MST-13 fragment and 𝐃𝐄𝐄's testimony?
Well, they used records from Frankfurt suggesting the unaccompanied bag transfer from KM-180, though that evidence was complex and sometimes contradictory.
Right.
They also introduced the testimony of a defector, Abdelbaset 𝐃𝐄𝐄, a former Libyan agent who claimed he witnessed Megrahi and Fima with a brown suitcase at Lucca Airport.
But 𝐃𝐄𝐄's credibility was immediately shredded, wasn't it?
I know, it was severely damaged. During cross-examination, it was revealed that 𝐃𝐄𝐄 was a CIA informant who had been paid substantial sums and had actively threatened to fabricate evidence if the U.S. didn't grant him residency.
So the court didn't rely on him.
Ultimately, no, but his presence really highlighted the high-stakes intelligence context surrounding the whole case.
And despite these evidential weaknesses, this reliance on a chain of circumstantial evidence. The verdict was delivered on January 31st, 2001.
Megrahi was found guilty of mass murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. The judges accepted the integrity of the MST-13 fragment and the critical corroboration of 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏's testimony about the rainy day.
But 𝐃𝐈𝐕𝐄 was acquitted.
Acquitted immediately. The court found insufficient independent corroboration linking him directly to the physical act of planting the bomb.
And this verdict, in the minds of many, settled absolutely nothing.
Far from it. Legal observers, including Dr. Hans Kuckler, the official UN observer at the trial, publicly denounced the judgment as arbitrary and unduly influenced by political considerations, specifically citing the court's reliance on 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏's often inconsistent and vague memories as the sole link to Megrahi.
The legal complexities continued, perhaps most notoriously with the firestorm surrounding Megrahi's compassionate release in 2009.
Right. Megrahi was imprisoned at Greenock Prison in Scotland when he was diagnosed with terminal prostate cancer, with doctors giving him a prognosis of less than 3 months to live.
So the Scottish Justice Secretary, Kenny MacAskill, granted him release.
Under a Scottish law provision allowing terminally ill prisoners to return home.
And the reaction from the U.S. was volcanic.
Absolutely. President Barack Obama, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, many congressional leaders publicly condemned the decision, calling it absolutely wrong.
For the American families, it must have felt like a profound betrayal.
Oh, they viewed it as justice being circumvented by sympathy. And the anger was magnified tenfold when Megrahi, defying that 3 months to live prognosis, was met by cheering crowds and welcomed as a hero when he arrived in Tripoli.
That image was devastating to the victims' families.
And the fact that he lived for another 2 years and 9 months, until May 2012, it fueled immediate and persistent conspiracy theories.
The main one being that it was a quid pro quo deal for oil.
The prevailing theory, though denied by subsequent UK government inquiries, was that the release was a political favor to smooth the way for BP oil contracts with Libya. It created this sense that even justice itself had been corrupted by commerce and geopolitics.
And this deep skepticism about the official narrative was personified by the figure of Dr. Jim Swire,
a British physician whose daughter Flora died on Flight 103.
Swire initially led the UK family groups, but his single-minded quest for truth drove him to conclude that Megrahi was innocent.
That he'd been used as a political scapegoat. And this belief created a huge, painful rift within the victim's family community.
Swire's actions were highly dramatic.
Incredibly so. He became a high-profile activist, convinced that the safety issues that led to the bombing had never been fixed. In 1990, he smuggled a fake bomb made from marzipan and a radio onto a British Airways flight just to expose security laxity.
That is an astonishing, almost unbelievable level of activism born out of grief.
It speaks to the depth of his conviction that the truth lay outside the official verdict. He even traveled to Libya to meet Colonel Gaddafi personally, appealing directly to the dictator for the true identity of the bombers.
Presenting him with a photo of his daughter.
Yes, and while British families often empathized with Swire's frustration, his actions and his belief in Megrahi's innocence led many U.S. family groups to view him as tragically misguided, further deepening that division.
The controversies and the doubts persisted because there has always been a powerful, persistent alternative theory.
That the bombing was direct retaliation for the downing of Iran Air Flight 655, making the true perpetrators Iranian-backed Palestinian militants.
This theory is potent because the motive is so clear.
Vengeance for the 290 Iranian civilians killed 5 months prior, and the mechanism suggested that Iran contracted the PFLP-GC led by Ahmed Jibril to carry out the attack.
And initially, the evidence linking the PFLP-GC was very strong, wasn't it?
Crucially strong. In October 1988, just weeks before Lockerbie, West German police conducted Operation Autumn Leaves, raiding a PFLP-GC cell.
And what they found were several sophisticated Toshiba radio cassette bombs.
Specifically designed for aircraft destruction, utilizing barometric triggers to arm at altitude.
This sounds almost identical to the eventual Lockerbie bomb. So why did the investigation, initially focused on Jibril and Iran, decisively shift to Libya in 1990?
This is where the geopolitics of the Gulf War become paramount. Critics argue, often quite compellingly, that the investigation shifted due to naked political expediency.
Because in 1990 and 91, the U.S. was assembling the coalition to confront Saddam Hussein.
Exactly. And to make that coalition viable, the U.S. required the neutrality, if not the active support, of key regional players.
Like Syria and Iran.
Precisely. Targeting them by blaming the PFLP-GC would have jeopardized the coalition. Blaming Libya under the already globally unpopular Gaddafi was politically far more convenient. Libya was isolated and presented a soft target that served U.S. strategic interests perfectly.
So the argument is that the investigation followed a political narrative, not necessarily the purest forensic trail.
Especially considering that crucial distinction between the radio models.
Right.
That discrepancy in the radio model was used to dismiss the PFLP-GC evidence, but proponents of the alternative theory argued that the forensic evidence was simply made to fit the politically convenient Libyan attribution.
And let's not overlook the chilling coincidence of the Helsinki warning.
That warning arrived at the U.S. Embassy in Helsinki on December 5, 1988, just 16 days before the bombing. An anonymous caller stated explicitly that a bomb would be placed on a Pan Am flight originating from Frankfurt, the exact feeder route, within the next 2 weeks.
That level of specificity is terrifying.
It is. The FAA took it seriously enough to issue a security bulletin. Some U.S. Embassy staff in Moscow actually altered their travel plans based on it.
Wow.
And while investigators eventually dismissed it as a lucky hoax, the uncanny match Frankfurt origin, Pan Am flight, U.S. destination remains a major source of suspicion for those who believe a broader conspiracy was at play.
And the suspicion only grows when you bring in the long-standing allegations of evidence tampering regarding the MST-13 fragment.
This goes back to Thomas Thurman, the FBI expert who identified it. Whistleblowers, notably Frederick Whitehurst, a former FBI lab employee, alleged that Thurman had a history of scientifically questionable practices designed to produce results that supported prosecutorial theories.
So the defense argued that because the MST-13 fragment was the only physical link to Libya,
its identification was compromised, planted, or deliberately misidentified to support the political narrative.
this profound complexity, political motive versus forensic integrity, is why the pursuit of justice couldn't end with Megrahi's death. Which brings us finally to the emergence of the third man, Abu Aguila Mohammed Masood.
Masood was long suspected, but never charged until recently. He was known within Libyan intelligence circles as the technical mind, the explosives expert, the man who likely built the device.
And the crucial breakthrough against him came in 2012, after the fall of the Gaddafi regime.
Correct. Masood was imprisoned in Libya for unrelated crimes when, during an interview with Libyan law enforcement, he allegedly confessed.
What did he say?
He claimed he built the bomb that destroyed Pan Am 103, that he set the highly specific timer, and he confirmed the entire operation was ordered by the highest echelons of Libyan intelligence.
This confession provided the necessary evidence to charge him in 2020.
Leading to his arrest and transfer to U.S. custody in late 2022, he is the first suspect to face trial in an American federal court.
And his trial promises to be the definitive final legal chapter, but it is moving very slowly.
It's been repeatedly postponed, now projected for May 2025 or even April 2026. This delay is understandable, however, given the astonishing volume of evidence the defense has to review.
356 gigabytes of data and 413,000 files accumulated over 37 years.
It's a massive, massive undertaking.
And the stakes are incredibly high. Scottish authorities have fully cooperated, transferring key physical evidence, the fragments of the slalom shirt, sections of the fuselage, to the U.S. for forensic re-examination.
The prosecution will lean heavily on validating Masood's confession against this physical evidence. If they can definitively link the confession details to the technical construction of the bomb, it could finally provide an undeniable, court-backed account of the plot's execution.
And potentially end the decades-long debate over who the true culprits were.
Potentially.
The long shadow of Pan Am 103 extends far beyond the courtroom and the geopolitical maneuverings. It fundamentally changed global aviation safety protocols.
It was the necessary, tragic catalyst. That disaster shattered the prevailing illusion of safety and directly mandated the rigorous global security standards we now take for granted.
Most critically, the 100% hold baggage screening and passenger bag reconciliation.
Yes, the rule that no unaccompanied bag should ever fly again.
It created the blueprint for how airports operate today.
Absolutely. The lessons learned in Lockerbie are the foundation of modern airport security worldwide. And while the technical changes were vital, the human legacy remains the true testament to the tragedy.
A legacy that's sustained through constant remembrance.
The memorials at Syracuse University, Arlington National Cemetery, and the simple, profound memorials in Lockerbie itself ensure that those 270 lives lost are never relegated to history books.
And the continuation of the remembrance scholarships ensures that those interrupted futures are honored by new generations of dreamers and leaders. So we stand at this curious crossroads. Decades of investigation, political wrangling, and forensic debate,
Yeah.
all culminating in a single-man waiting trial in the U.S.
Yeah.
Given the decades of conflicting political narratives, the shadow of Iran, the political expediency, the allegations of planted evidence, what specific details about the plot's ultimate execution, particularly regarding that MST-13 timer and the precise transfer mechanism, might Abu Ahila Massoud's upcoming trial finally reveal?
Whoa.
And can that knowledge ever truly silence the alternative theories and provide total, undeniable closure for the Weld?
The closure is the hardest part. The alternative theories and the political narratives have become so ingrained in the public consciousness, especially in the US and the UK, that no single court verdict may ever eliminate them entirely.
Right.
However, if Massoud's testimony, the testimony of the alleged bomb maker, provides undeniable, verifiable details about how he acquired the MST-13 timer from Meebo, how he integrated it into the RTSF-16, and how that bomb was physically introduced into the system at Lucca.
And what?
It offers the greatest chance in 37 years for the families and for history to finally have the clearest possible truth about the execution of this horrific act.
A deeply complex, ongoing story that continues to shape our world. Thank you for guiding us through this essential deep dive.